Jesus wasn't the only Christmas miracle.
There's also the United States of America.
On Christmas 1776, George Washington found himself in a situation not unlike going to Target to shop for presents on December 23rd.
George had little choice, but had to do something, anything fast.
England sent 30,000 troops to the colonies. Although Washington started with just as many, after constant defeat in New York and retreat across New Jersey, he found himself in Pennsylvania with 2,500 volunteer men, most of whom were contracted to leave on New Year's Eve. The British, in pursuit, were feeling pretty good and bed up for the winter.
Why fight in winter? Especially when New Jerseyans were giving them enough trouble attacking their foraging parties that they had to spread their garrisons across the state. Washington saw this as an opportunity. He would make one final push into New Jersey, focused completely on the 1,500 Hessians stationed in Trenton. The Hessians, hired German soldiers, would be celebrating Christmas, as Germans, really are good at. But make no mistake, these were professional soldiers trained by the famous Frederick the Great and probably the best fighters the British had.
To explain how crazy this plan was, let's bring up the most famous painting in American history, Washington Crossing the Delaware, created by German-American immigrant Emanuel Gottlieb Leitze in 1851, when Germany was in revolution and the rest of the world was in turmoil. It was at this point that Washington, and all he did, was gaining real international legend.
But that painting, oh man, it has some serious problems. The winter of 1776 was hellish, but there was some thaw a few days before which made the crossing possible.
But on Christmas, a massive nor'easter entered the area. That night it was snowing, hailing, and sleeting. And yes, Washington decided to use the cover of night to cross, so let's fix that.
It is also worth noting that when they enlisted, these men were given only one uniform, 2 pairs of socks and shoes. By this time, no one literally had shoes. Some people say there are bloody footprints going all the way to Trenton, but they probably had all other things on their mind because in the 18th century, few people could swim, to the dismay of the avid swimmer Benjamin Franklin.
The real boats were large, flat-bottomed Durham boats, which, while they did allow for standing, couldn't exactly fit horses and cannons. Those came over in ferries. The Americans were supposed to attack at 8 a.m., but did not attack until 10:30 a.m. The crossing took an extra 4 hours.
Finally, the American flag, that wouldn't be designed until a few years later, by Betsy Ross of course, so unless there was some time travel involved.
But what actually occurred was just as incredible. Washington would surprise the Hessians, take Trenton, and push forward to take Princeton a year later.
There is no doubt that this single Christmas surprise ultimately won Washington the Revolution and freedom. Historians say a messenger arrived at Colonel Rawls, the Hessian commander's door that night, carrying intelligence saying the Continentals have landed. However, this note never reached Rawls, since he was busy, of course, enjoying the festivities. This one act in history could have completely wiped out the United States.
And well, folks, as for the rest of the story, he went down in history like George Washington.
You wrote this whole thing just to get that one joke, didn't you?
Yep.
I'm done. Unbelievable. I'm done.